Hello, we're John and Elizabeth. We found out it was Sunday today because we went to go and buy something and the shops were shut, which I guess means that we're gently losing track of time. Well, we've been going for a fortnight and this is a little bit of an update on our progress. Hope you enjoy this video. Well, we were, when we last spoke, pretty much storm-bound on the River Fowl, and we went and hid from that weather, Storm Noah.
Storm Noah, and we went up to
Well, we went up to Mopus.
Mopus, I can't pronounce it.
Mopus.
Mopus, and then there was a short walk into Truro, which was lovely.
Yeah.
And then we came back down
and parked ourselves in Port Pendennis, in order to stay out of the way of that storm. And it's no doubt about it, if looking at the weather forecast improves the weather, then we should have got away a bit earlier, but it turned out that doesn't work.
No.
But it was going to be a reasonably interesting sail to where we got to, and I actually went through the whole process of passage planning from soup to nuts on this one. Not something I would normally do, because normally I'm sailing in waters with which I'm quite familiar
with, yeah.
But I haven't been here for 40 years and you've never been here at all.
No.
So I thought we'd just walk you through how all that works.
I'm loving the Isles of Scilly.
I thought you were going to let out the bag where we were.
Oh gosh, no. Oh well.
Not to worry.
Not to worry.
Well, it's sunset on Friday 14th. It is definitely the 14th, and we are exactly due east of the Lizard, heading southwest in a northwesterly breeze. We're heading to the Isles of Scilly, and it was originally, when we set off, it was about 20 knots, and we are pretty well reefed down. We've got our heavy weather jib on, and at the moment we're doing 5.5 knots, but if it continues to die, we're going to feel a little bit under-canvassed. That is quite a lot better than over-canvassed.
Yeah, I think it's always wise to be on the area of caution, because it's easier to bang it out rather than putting it.
So we had a good passage from Falmouth to Scilly overnight, and it was a fair old trek, and it was the first passage that we've done in this boat in what would be described as unfamiliar waters. It was the first time I've been here. I think I was here when I was 19. So because of that, we went through a full passage planning thing. Now there is an obligation on people to have a passage plan, but there is no obligation about what that looks like, nor even does it need to be written down. But in this particular case, I felt that it did,
Yeah.
and we both talked through the passage and what was going to happen so that people knew what to expect. But so we had the conversation about that. But there's a lot of prior art in passage planning, and there are things like most pilot books and a lot of sailing books have passage planning pro forma in them. What we did was we had a good look at the weather, because that was going to be the dominating factor. We wanted to make sure there was a window that we could get there reasonably comfortably, and my guide for that was really nothing above a 6.
Yeah.
Strong wind, fine. Gales, not fine.
And I think we've come to that conclusion. Unless we are caught out in a storm, we will. Yeah.
So
nothing above 6.
So that was the weather, and we found the right window. The tides were going to be what they were going to be, but absolutely getting round the Lizard, picking your moment is a good thing to do, because the less careful you are about that, the more you have to stand off. So we were lucky. The time that we wanted to go and the tides coincided, because we wanted to leave in the daylight in order to arrive in the daylight. It's a 60-mile trip and therefore a 12-hour-ish journey for us. So we were able to leave 1800 with a view to arriving
at sunrise, and that coincided with the tide setting to the southwest to carry us round the Lizard, and that worked really well. There are numerous sources of reference that are worth looking at. I would absolutely always suggest have yourself a good read of a pilot book. It's just really quite reassuring reading somebody else's experiences of it. Not really relevant for here is the Marina Guide, but that ideally will be relevant for later on.
Yeah.
And really quite important. There's this nautical almanac that we have on the boat.
I mean that is
hugely useful, and it's got all the sorts of stuff that very much at your fingertips. Everything from sunset, sunrise, moonrise, the tides, the tidal streams, and the description of the points that you're going to round, as well as lots of little gems of advice of just be careful about this, think about that, look at this. So between them we went through those in quite a lot of depth. We also get the weather either on VHF, the inshore waters forecast, or on the phone when we're looking a bit further out. Either a weather app or indeed the Met Office do some really nice long range stuff, as well as listening to it on the radio.
And I know that I can relate more to the Beaufort scale. Looking at that and then relating it to
what I try to do with the Windy app is look at it 4 or 5 days out in advance and say to myself, what would the inshore weather forecast look like or sound like if it was written down like that? And that's exactly what I did for the passage. You know, I said to myself, what is the inshore forecast for the Isles of Scilly, Lyme Regis, the Isles of Scilly, going to look like? And we tracked that through, and that was very useful for setting up. You should always think about your vessel, no matter how familiar you are with it, what sail plan are you going to go with. And even though the weather was due to go light on arrival and did go light and we ended up motoring, we changed the head sail down to the heavy weather jib because I didn't want to be over canvassed. And
I think we've mentioned it a little bit later on that we put in the 3 reefs because it's easier.
We put the 3rd reef in just in case we needed it. In fact, we didn't. We ran with 2, and that was quite nicely balanced with the heavy weather jib. So you think about your vessel, think about the crew. We aren't very good at getting rest, so we had a snooze before we left, and then we were both pretty much up for most of the night, and that was great because the company was good, but for a longer trip we'd need to think harder about that. We got all of the navigation into the chart plotter, and I drew it out on a chart as well, and we knew exactly where we were going to be at what times. So when we were going to be south of the Lizard, when we were going to be at Wolf Rock, when we were going to encounter the traffic separation schemes. The other thing that's always down on the list is, what is your contingency plan? And for us, there really wasn't, because once we were round the Lizard, getting up to Newlyn or Penzance would have been right against the wind and properly hard work. It would have been a case of stay offshore, go a little bit south, turn against the tide but with the wind, and head back to Falmouth. That was our contingency. And the only other thing is, do people know where you're going to be and when you're going to arrive? So we let our daughter know that we were setting off. We let her know that we'd arrived. And I put a 6-hour window on the outside of that just because no point in alarming people unnecessarily. So those were the main parts of the passage plan: weather, tides, vessel, crew and the watches, navigation, and your contingency and your points of contact ashore. We're going to have to do exactly that for our next trip, which should be from here, maybe, to Ireland.
The thing is with that is that it is quite a distance.
That is twice the distance.
The distance, and there is no contingency plan.
It's another one where there's not very many places to run, but it looks like there might be an easterly breeze, and that fingers crossed that'll
Fingers
work.
crossed, and then hopefully when we get there, we'll probably need to batten down the hatches again, because I think there is a
Thursday looks a bit unpleasant. But
unpleasant.
let's look at the weather.
Yeah.
Well, that was passage planning in a bit of a nutshell. I think as we find ourselves in increasingly unfamiliar waters, we'll have to do this a little bit more. And it is I found it very useful talking the passage plan through with you so that you knew what to expect.
That's what you used to do. That was your job.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a bit.
It was.
I hope that's useful. I hope you find it useful in your sailing. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.